Joining me on the channel today is Helene Dunbar, author of Prelude for Lost Souls, out now from Source Books. And she's also the author of many other titles, including We Are Lost and Found and Boomerang. And I'm so excited to have Helene on the channel to talk about books and her process and her latest. So welcome, Helene.
Thanks, Carly. I'm happy to be here.
So I always like to get a little context for your process to becoming an author. What kind of kid were you?
Kind of the type of kid who rode her bike to the library and stayed there until they kicked her out. My first was working in a bookstore, so it's a little cliche, but.
And so what kind of books did you like when you were a kid?
I mean, I remember kind of going through the, Laura Ingalls Wilder stage, but that didn't last very long. They didn't have a lot of young adulty kind of books when I was a young adult. So I read my mom's books. My mom was really super, super thick, historical romancy novels that were 2,000 pages. And I would just devour them. Basically, if it wasn't nailed down, I would read it. John Jakes did this series called The Americans, and it was the whole history of America. And it was, kind of glorified, and all the rough edges were smoothed out. But it was this family generational book after book. And then I got really into science fiction. It was basically just picking up one book and liking the author, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So really, my teen years, I was a pretty hardcore science fiction, speculative fiction.
Oh, very cool and interesting. So would you ever be writing a science fiction thing in the future?
No.
Your books are very not science fiction at all.
I'm honestly surprised that I've written, kind of a fantasy. I've dabbled with fantasy. The first thing I ever tried to write was a fantasy, but I'm not really a fantasy reader particularly. I like things that are really grounded in the real world that just happen to have, fantastical elements. So.
And so what was your path to going from being a reader to wanting to become a writer?
Oh my gosh. So I always wrote, going back to school. I can't even think of a time where I didn't write something. I mean, I was editor of my high school newspaper and the literary journal, and I was always writing really, really bad poetry. And in ninth grade, I wrote this kind of novelette about a baseball playing angel. And it won an award from the Detroit News. But then I in high school, it was all journalism. And when I went to college, I was an English major, and I continued with journalism, and I got really into theater criticism. That was really my passion. I was going to be a drama critic. And I was actually after school in Chicago. But I took a creative writing class and did not do. So I gave up fiction for decades.
Oh, wow. And then what got you back into fiction again?
I lost a bet. I had two friends from college who were writers and who were after me to try it. And I was living in New York, and I was writing for a magazine in Ireland covering Irish music. And I was meeting all of these amazing people who had really interesting stories, and I was doing all these feature articles on them. And my friend Suzanne Kamada, who's a writer in Japan, she's from Michigan, we were roommates in college, but she was like, you've got to write about these people, you've got all these stories. And I was like, I can't write fiction. I've been telling you forever I can't write fiction. But I sat down and I tried it. And I'm a huge fan of Melissa Marr's Wicked Lovely series. So that kind of gritty, urban, again, the real world with fantastical elements. I wrote about these Irish music playing elemental fairies in New York. and it was like 104,000 words long, but I finished it. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't really want to show that one to anybody, but maybe something better. So that's basically, you know, I haven't really stopped since. So that was like in 2008 or 9.
So you've had a lot of books published. I've actually read every single thing that you've written, and that is saying something, because like there are very few authors I could say I have read every single thing that you have published. Like I can't even think of one. Like well probably Madeline Miller, but she's written 2 books. So but and I love every one of your books. The first one I picked up was What Remains. But I loved it because it's 3 weird kids with a weird relationship together, and I love that book. So you have a lot of the day I got my offer stories. So what is one of your favorite? This is the day that I got my offer story.
Wow. Can I tell you 2?
Oh, sure. Tell me 2. That's fine.
So my first book, These Dental Wounds, it wasn't the first one I wrote. It pubbed before What Remains, but we went out on submission with What Remains first, and it didn't sell. And so we got an offer on These Gentle Wounds, and I was walking my dog at the time, and I got a call from my then agent, and she's like, we got an offer. And it turned out that my editor still had What Remains on his desk, and he hadn't read it yet. So we convinced them to take both of them.
That's great.
So it kind of like felt like it worked out the way it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And Prelude for Lost Souls, I was in Minnesota at a business meeting, and we kind of knew like when it was going to acquisitions and, you know, all of that. But I had to tell like everybody at work, like, I may have to like dart out of this meeting, like, you know, if my agent calls, and I did. Like literally it was right in the middle of this meeting, and I had to like run into the hallway, and like we're talking about contract details, you know, like in the hallway of this like corporate building. So
I mean, you've been publishing for a little while now, but what is one misconception that you had prior to becoming a published author that changed once you became a published author?
that once you sold a book, it got easier. You know, like, because then you have, you just replace one sort of angst with another sort of angst, you know, then you've got revisions and copy edits, and then you've got industry reviews, and then people you don't know are reading your book. You know, it's not like working with your crypt partners where you know each other's styles and they know the story as well as you do, and they're not going to mispronounce your main character's name, and you know, all of that. It's literally just fair game out in the world. And it really, it's what I imagine sending your kid to college is like, because you can't protect them, you know. So you've lived, it takes me so long to write a book that they really feel like such a part of me, and I want to like look after them and take care of them, and you can't do that.
So tell us about Prelude for Lost Souls. Give us the pitch and everything about it.
Oh, I'm so bad at pitches. So Prelude for Lost Souls is about a town called St. Hilaire, and it's based on a real life place called Lilydale, New York, which is the oldest spiritualist community in the US. And it's a gated community, and everybody makes their living by being a medium. They talk to ghosts. And people flock there in the summer, and they pay to get into the town, and they meet with mediums, and they try and, you know, contact people who have departed that, you know, they still have, you know, things to say to or hear from. And the first time I heard about that, I thought, what an amazing place to set a YA.
Mm-hmm.
And because I really wanted to capture this town, I kind of felt like, okay, I need a character who wants nothing more than to leave it, because how hard must that be? And the expectations, you know, if you come from a line of like 7 generations of mediums, what if you don't want to be a medium? You know, that just is such a, I think, natural young adult book. You know, but then you got to have somebody who wants it more than anything.
Mhm.
And so Jack Hampton comes from a line of mediums, and he's basically like done with it. He cannot wait to get out of town. And his best friend, Russ Griffin, grew up in Chicago until he was 14 with a mother who was a medium, but really in denial about it. And, you know, he had a pretty rough childhood because he was hearing things that nobody else did. And he not only wants to like live in St. Hilaire, but he wants to become part of the guild, which is like the creepy town council. And so you've got these two best friends, and this huge life affirming topic is between them, and they're on opposite sides of it. And there's a girl, a piano prodigy, whose train breaks down outside of town, and her teacher has just died. And he wanders into St. Hilaire, which she shouldn't be able to do because the gates are supposed to be locked. And she lands at Deck's house. And it would be all coincidental, except that in St. Hilaire, there are no coincidences. And it basically, she finds that she's connected to the town in ways she would have had no way of knowing, and she's connected to Deck. And Russ's ex-boyfriend shows up as a ghost, and mayhem ensues.
Yeah. No, I'm just kind of curious because mediumship is something I don't know much about. I'm really into the woo-woo. Many ways, UFOs, tarot, astrology, all of it. I'm into it. I don't know much about mediumship. What kind of research did you do?
Thankfully, there's been a lot written about St. Hilaire. There's HBO did a documentary on them, and there was a fantastic book, and I'm blanking on the name, but it was written by a journalist who was very skeptical and went to Lilydale and was basically, she wasn't trying to debunk it, but she wanted to really kind of do an open mind kind of book, and she did. And she interviewed a lot of the people, and you know, I'm not quite as into woo-woo as you are, although I've read tarot cards since college, and but I've had my share of weird experiences and kind of feeling like there might be something else out there. And because I was really trying to capture this real world, I tried to keep it very contemporary in its field. So
What was the most interesting anecdote from your research?
what I actually found really interesting was once COVID started, and obviously Prelude's already out, but I'm working on the sequel. Lilydale has a Facebook page, and they've been broadcasting live. But seeing, you know, in the same ways that like schools closed or restaurants closed, like they had to make the decision, do they close the town down? And the Prelude opens with a list of rules for mediums that St. Hilaire has. And Lilydale released this letter that basically could have been taken from my book, you know, that their Lilydale Assembly, which is their town council, basically like, you know, put down these rules and regulations. And it was just, it felt so much like it had come from this book. Like I sent it immediately to my agent, and I was like, this is really creepy, you know, but I guess that just makes me feel like I kind of got it right in tone. So
Yeah, definitely. And when you're writing, what's your favorite step, drafting or revising?
oh, revising. I hate drafting. It takes me 3 years to write a book, I'd say. So it's painful. Plotting is painful. I love brainstorming characters, but having those characters actually do anything is really the hardest part for me. But I love going back in and kind of futzing with the words and making it pretty. And, you know, the more you write, the more you learn about your characters. So I'm in a constant state of revision. I don't draft a full draft. So I write kind of out of order and then piece it together. But, you know, there are parts of each of my books that have probably been revised and revised and revised. Like I probably read my books 300 times just in the revision process. But that to me is fun because I know who the characters are then, you know, and I know how they would react to things, and I can, you know, just throw in little tidbits throughout. So.
And are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
Ooh, can I be both?
You can be whatever you want to be.
No. I'd say definitely more chaos than perfectionist, at least in terms of there are things I think I value in my books more than others. So I wouldn't say like if a word's wrong, I'm going to go off the deep end. But if a feeling's wrong, I think I'd get bent out of shape. You know, if people walk away feeling the wrong thing about a character, that's, I think, when I get really frustrated.
And are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
I'm a whenever I can find a free moment writer. I have a day job, I have a kid, I have a husband, I have other books to promote. So it's really, you know, I'm the kind of writer who's making notes in the grocery line. And, you know, I'm always jotting things down as I think of them. So.
And are you a plotter or a pantser?
Obviously, I'm a pantser. It's complete. I usually start with a theme or an idea. Boomerang, for instance, was literally like, you know, what if a kid ran away from, you know, everybody thought a kid ran away from home, but he really didn't. What if he left by choice? You know, and I thought, well, like, let's turn that whole kidnappy thing that was when I was a kid in the, you know, 80s. Unfortunately, there were a lot of kind of kidnappings where I was, and there were huge stories, and some of them were made into TV movies and whatnot. But I wanted to turn it upside down. Like, what if, you know, this kid left and landed someplace that they wanted to be more than they ever wanted to come home again? You know, so it's just that theme, and then I just build on it from there.
And so you're probably definitely a character first writer than a plot first writer.
Absolutely.
And what has been the best revision suggestion that you've gotten along the way?
Probably in We Are Lost and Found. Ron Goldberg, who was or is, he was very active in ACT UP in the 80s in New York. He wrote one of the afterwords to this book. And he kind of became my mentor through the writing of that. I actually had the book totally drafted by the time he saw it. But there was something about one of the characters, which is the main character, Michael, his older brother, Connor. And Ron and I were throwing ideas around, and he had suggested that maybe Michael's issues with Connor weren't what I had written, that maybe it was something else. And the minute he said that, like all these cogs just fell into place, and I totally rewrote their relationship. I didn't rewrite the characters, but their relationship changed. And I realized I had done, it was one of those weird psychological things, you know, when somebody says, oh, you're doing that for X, Y, and Z reason, and you're like, oh, God, you're right. I didn't even know that. That was exactly what this was. Like, there was an issue between the two of them, and I thought it was one thing, but it was really something else. And the minute Ron said that, I realized he was 100% right. And when I could make that clearer, you know, in the book, it was just such a great, fun experience.
And has there ever been a moment where you feared one of your books would never get published?
I would say that for all of my books, honestly. Boomerang probably had the most complicated path to publication because I basically changed agents a few times in the process, and a whole variety. There was basically the anything that could go wrong process went wrong with that book. But We Are Lost and Found, we had an offer on it within 24 hours, but I got really lucky that there was a huge snowstorm in New York. And one of the editors we sent it to read it while she was snowed into her house or her apartment. But that was the book that I think, had that not sold, I would have just, because that book means everything to me.
Yeah. And would you ever like to be famous?
My daughter and I have this conversation all the time because I told her I was talking to you for this, and she's like, "You're famous," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." She's like, "You are, you just don't know it." And I was like, "Oh gosh, you know, I don't really think about anything in that terms. You know, do I want people to read my books? Yeah. Do I need to be on the talk show circuit? Yeah, not so much."
And if you were to ever be able to have any non-supernatural quality or ability, and I have to keep on specifying with people, non-supernatural quality or ability, what would it be?
To play the fiddle. I'm left-handed, and even as a child, I wanted to play the fiddle. And when I went in third grade to test out all the instruments for band, they didn't have any left-handed instruments. And I'm hopeless doing anything right-handed. And then I started writing about Irish music. And of course, you know, there's all these amazing fiddle players, and it's still this like yearning in my soul. Like I really want to play the fiddle. But.
So is it possible to play the fiddle like left-handed? Are there any left-handed fiddle players?
There are.
But you need a special fiddle?
Right. Or, you know, very much like guitar players, you can learn to play it if you're at all ambidextrous, but I'm not. So.
And what are you working on right now?
I'm working on the sequel to Prelude, which I thought would never, ever, ever get written. I don't know. This is, I think, probably, you know, writing in the time of COVID has been a challenge. And trying to like finish Prelude up and promote We Are Lost and Found. This book has just sucked it out of me, and I've never really done a sequel before, and it's hard. Like, don't let anybody tell you it's easy. It's really, really hard. So I've sent it to my agent, and she sent me back lovely revision notes because she's amazing at that. And I'm revising it. I've got a couple of weeks left of that, and then I'm going to send it to her again, and then I'm going to send it to my editor. And I'll be very happy to have it off my plate. I love it. There are things about this book I love. It's just been, I need to put it aside for a while and come back to it, I think. So.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the channel. Helene has so many books, and I love them all. And so I hope that you will pick them up. And I'm going to put all of your links down below. Thank you so much for being on the channel.
Thank you, Carly.